Okay, so good afternoon, all of you. And since we have talked much about diaspora and literature, and since the very first day we have been discussing or mentioning at least the novel The Namesake. So I wanted to talk about it, and in fact, I wanted to begin the lecture with that. But now I think already Nazia ma'am has explained a lot, so there is no need to repeat all those points. So let's begin with the migration directly. Before talking about linguistic and cultural identity formation, let's have some or let's have a look at migration. How do we take migration, or what do we understand from that? Basically, there are certain terms which are interrelated. Whenever we talk about migration, that is moving from one place to other place, there are different terms that come to our mind. First thing, voluntary migration or involuntary migration, which earlier was known as exile. Exile is something that we do not discuss about in the present era, or whenever we discuss about diaspora literature or diaspora studies, we normally don't talk about exile, because now time has changed. The terms that were previously used, those terms are not used. Previously we had words like migration, going from here to some other place, from one place to another place. We had term like voluntary migration, we had term exile, and then another term that was related to exile was forced exile. So it gives us another thinking that forced, if there existed forced exile, that means there must have been voluntary exile also. Yes, it was there. But in the present time, we do not talk or we do not study all these words separately. There is this one word that is known as diaspora. It is an all encompassing word which has all the information within it. That is diaspora. So people who migrate from one place to other place, they are normally known as diasporic people. But there is a very small or a very tricky information or a tricky thing, a concept we can say. Like when you move within the national boundaries, you are not called diasporic. Movement within the national boundaries refers to migration. That is simple migration. I am migrating from this city to that city. Now, when I am migrating from this city to that city, another thing enters here. This is traveling. Now, migration and traveling are two different things. If you are going somewhere just for 15 days and after 15 days you will be back to your hometown, that is not migration. It will never be called migration. So the crucial term that we see here is settling down. We migrate from one place to other place and we settle down there. So settling down is the crucial term here. That is the crucial action to call or to understand the concept of migration. So within the national boundaries we study migration, and when this migration happens from one nation to other nation, then we talk about diaspora. Now there is another thing which we need to understand or we need to talk about is who is called diaspora. Is it one person, it is an individual, or something else? Basically, the definition of diaspora says the movement of a group of people or a community from one nation to another nation is called diaspora. So now we see that the crucial term here in this definition is movement of a group of people or a community. When an individual migrates from his or her country to some other place, that individual remains an expatriate. But still, we talk about one individual, one person as a diasporic person because that individual is a part of that group, is a part of that diasporic group in that nation. For example, we can say that as uh, if we take the example from our society, Indian society, we see that normally we have lots of people, lots of families around us who have someone or else living in Gulf. They have people, some of the families have family members living in Middle East, some living in Saudi Arabia. Like, so in this way we can say that if a person goes from India to Oman and settles down there, the person individually remains an expatriate, but since there are many Indians living in Oman and there is this Indian diasporic community, automatically the person becomes a part of that diasporic community. So automatically the person becomes diasporic person. So there are certain things which separate diaspora from internal migration. That is, you need to move from your country, go to some other countries and settle down there for a considerable period of time. When we go abroad just for traveling purpose or for some days, it is never called diaspora. Settling down is very important. So here there is this definition which Bill Ashcroft has given. He says, voluntary or forcible movements of the people from their homelands into new regions. Homelands into new regions. That is diaspora. So before moving ahead towards identity formation and cultural and language identities, there are two scholars whom I would like to mention here. They have given different perspectives about diaspora. The very first perspective, which was given by Safran, William Safran. So Safran says that diaspora, those people who have migrated from their nation to other place, they are diasporic people, but they need to have certain conditions or certain characteristics in them. Like if they move and there there are those characteristics mentioned by Safran, and if those characteristics are not there, Safran said that that is not the actual form of diaspora. So in his book Diasporas in Modern Societies, Myths of Homeland and Return, he has talked about diasporas and he has talked about certain conditions and characteristics of diaspora. Safran says diasporic communities is spread from motherland to two or more countries. When he said two or more countries, he has brought the concept of double diaspora. So we see double diaspora, like parents have migrated from one nation to other nation, and then the second generation migrates from that present nation to some other place. That is different, double diaspora. And then Safran also says that these communities, these diasporic people should remain attached with their homeland through memories, through a kind of link, some kind of information. So you might have noticed that people, the older generation, they like listening to the news about their nation. They very religiously sit in front of the television and listen to the news. They like to remain updated about their own countries. Whereas this younger generation, the second generation and sometimes the third generation of the diasporic families, they are not much interested in the news about their homeland, or I must say about the homeland of their forefathers, their grandfathers or their fathers. First generation does this thing because this information which they get from the news channels, this information keeps them connected with the land. Yes, social media is another example. They feel that they are a part of that land still. Whatever is happening there, they know everything. They are totally updated. And they discuss about all those things. So this way, they are knowing all those international happenings. At the same time, the national happenings are the happenings in their homeland. So this is something which Saffron has mentioned, that they remain attached to their homeland. They love to know about their homeland. The third condition he has mentioned is such communities, these diasporic communities, nurture a belief that the host country would never accept us as a part of them. So when Saffron wrote this condition or this characteristic, he was very much correct at that time. Just imagine the movement or the migration of Indians from here to different places, the first generation migration. Were they very open heartedly accepted by the host country people? No, they were not. They had faced a lot. The circumstances, the conditions that we are seeing in the present, and the circumstances and conditions that were then, if we compare, the conditions were really worse at that time. So that is why Saffron has said that these people always nurture the belief that the host country would never accept them. And this belief keeps them or makes them long for their homeland. They all the time want to go back to home. They all the time keep on thinking about going back home. You might have seen a movie. I forgotten the name of that movie. There is Aishwarya Rai is in lead character, and Rajesh Khanna plays the role of the father. Yes, Ab Lord Chale. The title itself speaks this thing, the concept given by Saffron. Yes, this is the when Saffron talked about this characteristic, it is a universal thing. He is not talking about any country specific or community specific. He is just talking about diasporic people. Like technically, the first recorded diaspora is considered to be the Jewish diaspora. Recorded diaspora. Okay, when we say that first recorded diaspora is the Jewish diaspora, it simply means that there might have happened some other diasporas also which couldn't get recorded. Hmm. They don't have that home at all. It is correct in some aspects, but when these diasporic people think about home, the home is always in their memory, and memory goes back to their homeland, memory goes back to their motherland. Home is always there. Whenever the term home comes in diasporic situation, it talks about the motherland. These diasporic people, whenever they think about home, after like in the same lecture we would be discussing about Himani Banerjee, so where we would see how home is represented. So as you mentioned that Jewish diaspora, so I would like to mention a few points here. So you might have heard or read that in East Africa, during the anthropological excavations were thrown up, and it is like the DNA of those skulls. The scientists said that the similar DNA is found in different communities throughout the world, or all around the globe. How this became possible? Just by migration, by moving from this place to that place. The Those excavations had thrown up the skulls of Australopithecus, and the DNA material that they could detect from those bones, these scientists, they came up with a result that the same DNA and similar DNA is found in the people of the present era living in different parts of the globe. So this gives an indication that migration had happened before the Jewish exile also, but it couldn't get recorded, and we can understand it in simple ways also, like moving from one place to other place is in human tendency, it is in our nature, and earlier migrations happened with a need of survival. Wherever they saw those food resources were available, they kept on moving in that direction.
The home has remained just a longing for them.
Yes.
Those who want, those who have come back and settled down again.
Can we discuss these things after the lecture?
Okay, fine.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, as I said that migration or moving from one place to other place is in human nature. And the earlier people, they had different reasons to migrate. In the present era, we have different reasons to migrate. Earlier, the basic reason was food and water. Food came from land in various forms like fruits, berries, vegetables, and in the form of animal meat. From water, food came in the form of fish. So wherever they found these things, they settled there. Since food resources were available at different places in plenty, they kept on moving from here to there. So this is how people got spread all around the world. So we were talking about saffron, and saffron talks about a longing for returning back to home. And he also has given another characteristic, and that last point says that there is always this belief in these diasporic communities that one day they go back home, or if they would not be able to go back home, their descendants would go back home. Now here we see another perspective which is given by Robin Cohen, a social scientist. He has created a wider picture of diaspora. Now this picture is somewhat different from the picture created by Saffron. Cohen believes that migration can be voluntary, migration can be forced, something similar as Saffron had said. But when Saffron said that these people all the time keep on longing for going back home, Robin Cohen came with the terms like acculturation and assimilation. People who live in a new country, they try to get accultured, or they try to assimilate into all those values and systems and norms and ways of the host country. Similarly, he also says that acculturation, which means adopting the ways of the new and dominant culture. In the condition or in the situation of diaspora, the dominant culture is always the host culture. This is very much visible. And assimilation, he said, absorbing and understanding the new system. So when these diasporic people, they start absorbing and understanding the new system, just a minute. So this absorbing and understanding is not possible in a day or two. So Robin Cohen said that they need time to settle down there. They need to live or spend considerable amount of time in that host country so that they can understand all those concepts, values, rituals, behavior pattern, and this time would give them a chance to assimilate into that new culture. And at the same time, he also says that the diasporic communities should not only focus upon like the present generation, but the assimilation and acculturation should be carried to the next generation also. And Cohen has described various forms of diaspora also in his book Global Diasporas. He talks about victim diaspora, labor diaspora, trade diaspora, and imperial diasporas. And the other one is cultural diaspora. There some examples are also given in this slide, so I don't think there is any need to read all these examples. So these two educationists, these two social thinkers, they have given their own perspectives or their own characteristics about diaspora. Now, what is diaspora in the modern time, or what is migration in modern time? Because modern diaspora, modern migration is totally different from the past migration. So diaspora, which is now studied in so many subjects, so many fields, like in social sciences, literary studies, genetics, science, economics, so many fields study about this concept. Every field comes with a totally, not exactly separate, but a sort of a unique definition, which brings in some or the other qualities in it, which all the time introduces some new characteristics in it. These we can discuss later on. So basically, whenever a diasporic person is there, we say that this diasporic person performs dual roles. The first one is the role of a refugee. The person is in the position of a refugee because the person seeks shelter. Another is the person performs the role of an ambassador because the person represents his or her culture. So these are the dual roles. Now let us have, or let us discuss the migration related to India. Indian migration can be divided into three parts: early migration, colonial, post colonial. Early migration, whenever we say early migration, we go back in history. It is believed that Indians are landlocked people. It was believed earlier that Indians were landlocked people. However, Bisun Dayal, in his book about diaspora, he writes that India had a very huge maritime business and shipbuilding business. So, which clearly shows that Indians used to migrate, because building ships and not using those is something unimaginable. So that those were the times when the British were not here, and at that time Indians were migrating. They were going from here to there. There are so many examples of Gujarati businessmen going to Africa and other parts of the world with a purpose of business, going from India to China with a purpose of business. So if we go backwards, we get there is this simple example of King Ashoka in the 5th century. How, like Buddhism, which is an Indian religion, how did it reach to different parts of the world? It was during the time of King Ashoka. We all know that his son traveled to different countries, and his daughter also, probably, so as to spread Buddhism. So this is one such example of early migration, and we see different like monuments also. You might have heard about Sevaith temple, and the temple of Angkor Wat. I'm talking about Java and Sumatra. So these are very old temples. I believe the temple of Angkor Wat was built in somewhere around 12th century. The British were not here in India at that time. So, and initially, as the records say, that temple was a Vishnu temple. Lord Vishnu was worshipped there. So these are some examples. Still, in Indonesia, they celebrate Gita Jayanti. So these are the festivals, these are monuments that clearly show, that clearly indicate that Indians had been traveling from here to different places. And then migration during the colonial era, we all are aware of that. Colonial era migration happened with that single reason, to establish different colonies. They picked up people from here and put them at different places. Like for sugar plantation, they picked up people from Uttar Pradesh, from Bihar, and placed them in Java, Sumatra, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, because the people in UP and Bihar were adept at sugar plantation. Here we get this sugar plantation which is known as cash crop. So for this cash crop thing, they picked up people from here and placed them in different places. That was the beginning of Indian diaspora during the colonial era, which is referred to as Bhojpuri diaspora. Initially, these people were sent on an agreement of 5 years, and after 5 years, they were promised that they would be released so that they can go, they would be free. If they wanted, they could stay there or they would go back home. However, things promised never happened. They were taken to different places on the lure of getting good salaries, a very healthy and happy lifestyle. These things never happened. They were hardly fed a meal a day. And you can read all these examples in the novel Jahajin, which is written by Peggy Mohan. Peggy Mohan has created a very nice picture of Girmitia diaspora. So Girmitia diaspora is the second one. After Bhojpuri diaspora, we get Girmitia. Girmitia is a term which has come from the English word agreement. These Bhojpuri people who were illiterate, they couldn't pronounce the term agreement, as they used to represent themselves that we are Girmitia. It means we are people who have come on agreement here. So they called agreement Girmit. So Girmitia has been taken from Girmit. Girmit for them was a paper which they signed, which gave them this possibility of reaching in a new land. So after this Girmitia diaspora, we get another form of diaspora during colonial rule, that was Kangni diaspora. Kangni is a word which is used for one person who was the middleman. Like as we do business, like from company, when the business, when that product reaches the customer, there are so many people. So these were the Kangni people. When they took people on agreement, and these Girmitias realized that, their families realized that no one was coming back from there. They were promised that they will come back with lots of money. No one is coming back. We are still poor. And those who were living there, they saw that their conditions were worse there. They were not given proper place to live. They were not given proper food. And even those harsh circumstances, the weather, it was not like Indian weather. They were not habitual of living in those circumstances, in those weather conditions. So British came up with another uh, system, or we can say another pretext. Now they said, they deputed one person, you are responsible for sending people now, and you will be paid for them. And so this, yeah, exactly, agent. So this Kangni was responsible for sending people to different British colonies, and normally this man brought people from his families or relatives or the nearby villages, kinships. So this was another form of diaspora that had happened during the colonial rule. So these are three major forms of indentured labor. They are okay, sorry, I forgot to move the slides. However, these slides would be shared later on. So indentured labor, because it is named so because each laborer signed a contract to work on a plantation for 5 years. Now let us talk very fast about identity. So these people, the first generation of diaspora, when they reached in different places, if we talk about Indian migration, so different British colonies, the circumstances, everything was totally new for them. I can cite one example here. The Sikh who were taken from Punjab when they, for Canadian Pacific Railways, when they were setting up that railway track, they picked up people from Punjab. Why? Because those Punjabi people were healthier than other people and they were habitual of doing all those hard works. So it was their decision. In the same way, for rubber plantation, they picked people from Tamil Nadu and other parts and they placed them in Sri Lanka and some other regions also. So these people who were taken there, the Sikh, when they reached Kolkata, because they were supposed to take the ship from there, and they were wearing their traditional dress. When they reached Canada, after living for some time, they realized that they were not accepted in the marketplace because of their dress. So they all started or managed somehow to wear coat suit. So this is one change that had happened. So we can get some more examples like that. So identity is a term which is very broad. Normally, when we talk about identity, we talk about certain markers. We get biological markers, environmental markers, and cultural markers. We all know that biological markers are those markers that we are born with, our appearance, how do we look, the color of our eyes, facial features, color of hair. So these biological markers differentiate people of one place from other places. Biological markers are permanent and are difficult to change. However, in the present era, we have all those like facilities where we are able to change biological markers also, at least to some extent. Fine. But at that time, biological markers, to change those markers was really hard thing, and these markers were used to identify them, and this identification is not just simple identification but to other them. Okay, just a moment. Okay, sorry for that interruption. So now the second kind of markers were in environmental markers. Environmental markers are those markers which we get from our surroundings. One such example can be of Inuit family or Inuit community. The people, Eskimos, commonly known as Eskimos, they are able to differentiate snow. If you look at snow, snow is snow for us. But when they look at it, they can tell the names or the varieties of snow because it is something that they have got from their environment. Another example is people who are in cattle business. These cattle rearing people, they can identify their cattle just by those pug marks, and we cannot identify them so easily. So these are the markers that people get from their surrounding. Those are known as environmental marker. Those are temporary, that can be changed. If you leave that one environment and shift to some other environment, you will start absorbing that environment and you will stop practicing those things which you earlier used to do in your previous environment. Simple. Slowly you will lose command on that thing and you will adopt some new environmental identity. Now that here is cultural markers. Cultural markers are those markers which are very strongly felt and experienced in a diasporic situation. Language, religion, custom, dress, food, education. Every host country expects these diasporic people to adjust at these levels, but at adjustment on these levels is not always so easy. It is not as easy as said. So when they are expected to change all those customs, there is this conflictual situation where they want to retain their old habits, their old customs, their old behavior or patterns which they have got from their homeland, but now the host country wants them to behave in a totally different way, to perform in a totally new way as they are doing, as they are living, have all those customs, have all those dress styles, as I have given you the examples of Sikhs. The condition was so, like, I must say, so difficult for them that they, certainly we as Indians, we are habitual of eating with hands, right? They had to eat with fork and knife, eating with fork and knife, and at that time was not a very easy to learn thing for them. But however, somehow they managed, and when they managed, what was the condition? Their minds got so much conditioned that they started eating even paratha sabzi with those things, fork and knife. So this is how mind gets conditioned. Okay, so these are the cultural markers at the level of dietary habits, customs, dress code, religious practices, where the diasporic community faces the clash. And language is also a part of identity. There are different identity markers along with the biological, environmental and cultural identity markers. Language which is a part of cultural identity marker, it is very strong formative concept of identity. I have written just 3 points: language shift, language loss, language death, and I would give you one example where all these 3 things have happened, but not the language death in exactly, but for that community. Okay, we all know that in India, one minority community is known as Parsis. Amongst all minority communities, there is one community that is called Parsis, and the technical term for them is Zoroastrians. Around 1400 years or somewhat, they landed at Sanjan, a place near Diu in Gujarat. They came from Iran because of some harsh political circumstances. They migrated from there. Fine. So a story goes like that, and some Parsis say that there are written records for that story, and some of them say that okay, it is just a story. However, it's a very interesting story. I would like to narrate it here. When they arrived there, King Jadav Rana was the ruler of that place. The Parsi Dastur is a term which is used for their high priest. For example, as we have Pujari, as we have Maulana, they have the term that is known as Dastur. So their high priest sent their messenger to the king to ask for shelter. The king's minister sent a bowl full of milk, full till the brim, very carefully, and gave it to the messenger and said, take it to your Dastur. That intelligent Dastur interpreted the message. It meant we are already overpopulated, no place for new people. Dastur took a spoonful of sugar, mixed it carefully in it, stirred it without spilling the milk, and returned it. Meaning, we would mix up as the sugar has dissolved in this milk without spoiling the texture, the color, and the quality of the milk. In the same way, we would live in this society without harming, without spoiling anything. So this is how Parsis reached India. But reaching here and settling down here was not easy, was not simple for them. They had to face so many circumstances, so many conditions, as is always happens with any diasporic community. I would tell you just 3 major conditions that were imposed on them at that time. The first condition, they were asked to uh, change their Persian robes to Indian Gujarati dress. Till now, they are keeping their words. None of the Parsis in India traditionally dress up as in their Persian dresses. Now they have their traditional dress as Gujarati sari and Gujarati dress. Right? So it is not their actual dress. Dress is a symbol of identity. They lost one symbol of identity when they came here as a diasporic community, as migrants, as refugees seeking shelter. Another condition was they were asked to leave their language. That was Persian originally. They were asked to leave their language and adopt the language of the host country, host state, that was Gujarati. Still, all around the world, you would see that every Parsi has Gujarati as his or her mother tongue, a condition that was imposed on them 1400 or 1500 years ago. They are still keeping their words. Third condition, they were asked not to do conversions. Parsis do not allow conversion in their religion till now. Okay, this is something which we can discuss at length. However, so language loss. The Parsi community faced language loss. They have another language, but they lost their their ethnic language. Parsi community had to shift from one language to other language. They had to adopt the language of the host country. This is how a diasporic community goes through change. This is linguistic change. Now let us talk about Indians who had gone to different places like to America or some other places all around the world when they were taken by those British during the colonial era. They also had to drop their language. They had to leave their language. Why? Because their mother tongue was not understood there, so they had to adopt the new language, that was English. So there are different examples also. For example, I have talked about Bhojpuri diaspora. These Bhojpuri people, when they were in Trinidad, they got the language from there. But here enters the role of women. Here, and we see what is the actual role of women in preserving the linguistic and cultural identity. As we know that women are the source of stabilizing a family as well as the community. So in diasporic communities also women played that role of stabilizing source, stabilizing force. The In the present era, we have Trinidadian Bhojpuri Creole. We have French Bhojpuri Creole. When they reached there, Mauritius, French was spoken there, but the women, they maintained their Bhojpuri. They had to learn the new language, the language of the host country, but they maintained their Bhojpuri also. So this way, somewhere they preserved their Bhojpuri language. And same had happened in Trinidad also. However, they could not preserve it in so efficiently or so strongly as it was there. Fine. So Trinidadian Bhojpuri Creole. So you can get examples of this thing in the novel Jahajin. Okay, here I would like to talk about the term Jahajin also. These people who migrated during the colonial rule from India to different places, or who were taken forcibly, they went by sea, the sea route, the ship. Ship is called Jahaz in Hindi. So, and the journey was for around 30 days or 40 days sometimes. So, for living together for these many days, they developed that brotherhood. So, they referred to each other as Jahaji Bhai. And the women, they started calling themselves as Jahajin, not Behan, Jahajin. Yes, that is the exact term, Jahajin. So this Jahaji Bhai, the relationship remained there all through their lives till they lived in those lands. Now, as I said, brotherhood or that Jahaji Bhai relationship, we see in the present time also, women are there to preserve their linguistic and cultural identity in different ways just by creating this brotherhood or Jahajin relationship with one another. Like they are celebrating their festivals, they are following their cultures, they are teaching their mother tongue to the younger generations. However, the younger generation is most of the time not interested in knowing about the homeland of their parents, knowing the language spoken by the parents, but these women are still maintaining. So here I have taken up some examples where we see how language becomes a tool to other someone, like a medium of othering one community. As in this stanza, Imtiaz Harkar, she writes in the poem, She Must Be From Another Country. She says, when I speak on the phone and the vowel sounds are off, when the consonants are hard and they should be soft, they'll catch on at once, they'll pin it down, they'll explain it right away to their own satisfaction. They'll cluck their tongues and say, she must be from another country. So the way we speak their language is not sufficient, or the way a diasporic community speaks the language of the host people is not sufficient for them. They want them to speak their language and speak it in a way as they speak. Right? They want the language there, they want it spoken in their way only. This is clearly written by Imtiaz Dharkar, a very good example of linguistic othering. So now here I have chosen some movies. We have all talked about this one, like the namesake. From the very first day we have been discussing about the namesake. Now DDLJ, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. I believe most of the people have watched this movie. So I'm not sure about these younger people, but it was a craze when we were in college. Okay, so a movie which shows Indian culture in a diasporic family. The family of Amrish Puri, the family of the protagonist Kajol, where the father wants the family, wants his daughters to stay connected with the roots. And roots are where? Where the home is. Home is motherland. That's why he takes them to Punjab and he wants his daughter to get married to a Punjabi boy so that the girl would remain connected with the roots. This is how one generation tries to preserve the culture, maintain the culture. However, this method is not always accepted by the younger generation. Another example, a very old film, Purab or Pachim, where we see Manoj Kumar and Saira Bano playing the role of Preeti. So, and the father plays Onka Pran. Yes. Okay. So the father is shown as a character who is in dilemma. He wants to go back home. He wants to remain connected with his roots, but the younger generation, which is represented by Preeti, Saira Bano, but he gets defeated by the younger generation. Younger generation is westernized, a very good example of the present day diaspora also, where the parents want to remain connected with the roots, but the younger generation is not interested in those roots because for them the homeland is the present land. However, in that present land they are not accepted as fully westernized or fully a part of that host country. There they are seen as expatriates, as diasporic people, but they want to identify themselves as a part of, as an integral part of that host country. They do not refer to themselves as I am an Indian or a person from some other place. So this is The condition which is shown here in this film Purab and Pashchim, now the one where Rani Mukherjee has played the role of Debita Chatterjee, Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway, a film which shows the strength of a mother. Actually, this film is based on a real life story. So, here, how culture becomes like a reason for confusion. All those Norwegian authorities, they observe this family, they see that, okay, this is a family, there is this husband, a wife, and 2 children. Now the mother feeds the boy with her hands. The boy sleeps with mother. Kids are sleeping with parents. And the mother plays with them. Like, instead of disciplining the children in the Norwegian way, the mother is bringing them up in her Indian way. Now, the cultural confusion results in the Norwegian authorities taking up those kids from the parents and putting them up in foster care. The woman fights, she comes back home and keeps on fighting, and eventually she wins. So, here I have taken up this example just to show how cultural differences happen in a diasporic situation. But women are there to preserve their cultures. Women are there to say it is a culture of their homeland, and if they lose this culture, if they leave behind this culture and try to move forward, they would get disconnected from their roots. Next example I have taken is from a poem by Himani Banerjee, which she has titled as A Letter for Home. She says, I still have a stake on this land. It is true that I have walked a long way, carrying an earthen jar with the ashes of my ancestors, earth from my land, some grains and oil, and my cast of umbilicus. I would go to the last line. Vibrating with the life is still left throbbing. Okay, at night in bed, I feel the house vibrating with the life is still left throbbing in the earth where my umbilicus lies buried. Here there is this story which is related to Indian culture, umbilicus lies buried. It is believed in Indian culture that after the birth, when umbilical cord is detached, if we bury it somewhere, the child remains connected with that land. That's what Himani Banerjee has mentioned here in this poem. He says, I still remain connected with the land where my umbilicus is buried. So this is how she feels connected. And she gets some other things also, like earthen jar with the ashes of my ancestors, earth from my land, some grains, oil, all these things. So these are the representatives of memories. The stories, all those things that diasporic people carry with them when they move to a different land. And the last example is from a poem written by Lakshmi Gill, Letter to a Prospective Immigrant, where she wants a prospective immigrant and she tells him or her that there are so many things which you should know before reaching this new land. And the very first line says, Canada the cold, that about that tired myth, Canada the cold. No, not a myth, I assure you, don't come naked. So this term cold not only refers to the weather, the coldness of the weather, it also refers to the cold behavior of the people, which the expatriates, which these diasporic people suffer at the hands of the host country. So, ma'am is here, and I have taken like 7 extra minutes, I think. So we would discuss about these points in the next lecture tomorrow. So if you have any questions, or shall we start so that we do not have to wait a lot? Okay, just check if we can have a tea break before beginning with another session. Okay, thank you so much for listening to me so patiently. You're not audible. You have a question for Nazia ma'am. Ask it. Or do you want to come here and ask? You would be audible properly. Come here.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening. Ma'am, as you have mentioned that Anita Desai's novel Bye Bye Blackbird, she has referred to some characters which you have mentioned Jemu Bhai from the other novel as she's been referred to characters relating to the Maculist minutes. You have named a character, ma'am. Can you just throw an overview about that? I couldn't get that. Just that. Just that why that character has been connected by the Maculis minor. Like Anita Desai have assigned that characters in the Bye Bye Blackbird novel.
Unfortunately, I don't remember the name, but there is one character who seems to be an Anglophile in his habits, in his lifestyle. And Anita Desai has taken up this issue in various novels. Like there, she touches upon the Indian culture. She also touches upon, in another novel, she touches upon the importance of Urdu language and literature and poetry. So in Bye Bye Blackbird, as I told you, I don't remember the name, but there is one character like Jemu Bhai, not a major character, it's a minor
Minor
character,
character.
and she gives that
Okay,
term.
participants,
So that remained with me.
there is slight delay.
Thank you.
Due to which